Hi darlings, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a new sewing class prepared for you on how to sew a sweatshirt exactly like the one you see next to me. So in today's class we will learn how to make the classic sweatshirt. So we will do everything from beginning to the end, meaning we will do our own pattern based on our own measurements, and we will do the assembly as well, including how to do the neckline, how to do the arms, how to do the bottom, everything. I really love making sweatshirts because they're so comfortable to wear. They're great pieces to add to your wardrobe, to your everyday wardrobe in particular. You can personalize it, and when you're making sweatshirt based on your own measurements, well, the fit is perfect. Now, before moving further to the video, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor of the video, Mettler. Mettler stands for thread, color, and imagination. Mettler was founded in 1883 in Switzerland, and since 1988 it was the part of the Amann Group. Mettler offers a huge selection of threads for creative needle workers, so no matter if you're sewing, quilting, doing embroidery, or overlocking, you will find the right thread for you. Mettler threads are available in a huge selection of colors, surface finishes, looks, and effects, and all of their threads are produced to the highest quality standards. You can find Mettler threads in Europe, North America, Asia, Africa, and Australia, so basically everywhere around the world. In today's video, I will show you different Mettler threads, and I will tell you a little bit about each one of them. So thanks again for Mettler for sponsoring this video, and now let's begin our class. So, in the beginning of the video, let's talk of what materials we will need to create our sweatshirt. First, of course, we will need the main fabric for the bodice and the sleeves of the sweatshirt. So this fabric has to have quite good stretch. The color and the texture, of course, depends on you, how you want your finished design to look like. However, please do note that this pattern that we will be doing today only works if the fabric is stretchable. I also like to use material that has a little bit of fleece in the inside because I really like how it feels to the body. But of course, if you are going for a more lightweight sweatshirt that you want to wear, for example, in summer, then of course the fleece is optional. So second material that you will need is rib knitting. And rib knitting is highly stretchable fabric that recovers to shape beautifully. So we will add rib knitting to our neckline, to the cuffs, and to the bottom of our sweater. When you're buying rib knitting, make sure that it either fits color-wise with your main fabric, or you can choose, of course, contrasting one depending on what your design you're going for. So once you have the materials picked out, I really want you to take time and prepare them well. What do I mean by preparing them well? So the general rule is how you will treat your garment later on. You have to treat your fabrics exactly the same way. So I like to wash my sweatshirts in the washing machine and then put it in the dryer and dry it out. So I will do exactly the same thing with the fabric. Before cutting it out, I will wash it in the washing machine and put it in the dryer. And what this step will give us, it will prevent the fabric from shrinking in the later process, and so you will not have that risk. I know that sometimes people like to skip this step, but I highly recommend you to prepare your fabrics, especially when you're working with knits, because during the first wash they do have the tendency to shrink, and you really do not want to put your effort into making sweatshirt and then put it in the washing machine and take it out all shrunk. So take your time and prepare your fabrics in advance. So second thing that we will need is, of course, threads, and today we will be using Mettler Cerakote overlocking thread, which is the universal overlock thread with great gliding properties. You can use Mettler Cerakote for any kind of overlock. It will not break, it's trouble-free thread, and you will have a great time working with it, and also it will maintain its color no matter how much you will wash it later on. And second thread that we will use is the Mettler Ceraflex. So Mettler Ceraflex is innovative thread which has really good elongation, which is about 65%, or in other words is double the elongation of standard thread. So this means that when we will be doing top stitching, Mettler Ceraflex will make sure that those stitches do not pop out, and it will give our seams extra elasticity. And now lastly, if this step is optional, but if you will be doing embroidery, you will also need embroidery threads. So today I will be doing my embroidery with Mettler Polysheen thread. So Mettler Polysheen thread really shines beautiful and will make your embroidery gorgeous. So now that we have all of our materials prepared, let's move to the next step, which is measure taking. So now I want you to grab the measuring tape because we will start taking our measures. So I will show you how to take measures on the dress form that you see next to me, but of course you will have to take measurements of your own body. And to take really accurate measurements, you have to wear a very close fitting clothing so that, you know, if I measure now my waistline because I'm wearing a very chunky sweater, of course the measure will be different. So you have to wear a very light and close fitting clothing to really get that accurate measurement. Also, a few of the measurements we will be taking will be quite difficult to take by yourself, so it's a good idea to have a friend or a family member help you out and take those measurements for you. So let's start. From the front, we will need the following measures. We will need the width of your bust, which is measured from here to here. So just measure like this, something like this. Second measure that we will take is the bust circumference, so you will take it like this. Third measure is the waist circumference, which is the most narrow point of the waistline. So here I am showing how to measure it. I hope you are measuring and writing everything down because we will need those measurements for our pattern making. Now we will turn our figure and see the back. First measure that we will be taking is the shoulder width. So from the shoulder line, so the widest shoulder part, to another widest shoulder part. So it will be measured something like this. Now, same as we did with the front width, we will measure the back width, and it will be measured like this. So basically you will measure from this point to the same point or on another side of the back. Now we also want to take a few measures from the highest point of our shoulders. For you, this shoulder will be somewhere here, and we will measure from the top shoulder part. We will measure the back length to the waistline. Write it down. And then second measure that we will take is the length of our sweater. So it depends on you where you want the sweater to be. You can measure till here to here. It doesn't matter, just measure from the top shoulder part to the point where you want it to be. Also, now that you know the point where you want your sweater to be, so you have to measure your hip circumference in that exact point. So we measure that our sweater length will finish somewhere here. So this is exactly where I'm measuring hip circumference. So Julie from the future here, I forgot to include one more measure. So measure from the end of the shoulder to the middle of the waistline at the back, just like shown in this photo. Another measure that we will need to take is the armhole depth. This is really kind of a tricky measure to take, but it will be measured from the highest point of the shoulder down to where you want your armhole to finish. So how to measure it? It's a good idea to just take the ruler. Okay, I am wearing a very chunky sweater today, so it's difficult to show. But you will put the ruler where you want your armhole to be, and you just simply measure it here. So on the mannequin it would look something like this. Let's say we want the armhole to be here. Just roll like this, and we will measure from the highest point of the shoulder to that line. So here. The standard is somewhere about 22 centimeters, but of course for each it can vary. And now last three measures is all about the arm. So first you will need to measure your arm at the widest spot, so somewhere here. So you will measure it like this, so like this, and you want to really touch with your measuring tape the part where the armhole will start here. So let this measure be pretty loose because you don't want the sweatshirt sleeve to be very close fitting, so give it a little bit of ease. You will also need to have the wrist circumference. And again, I will just add a little bit of ease if you don't want your sleeve to be very close fitting. So my wrist in general is 16 centimeters, but I will be doing 20 centimeters, so just give it a little bit of moving space. And the last measure to take is to measure the sleeve length. So from the beginning of the shoulder all the way to the wrist where you want your sleeve to finish. So now that you have all your measurements ready, let's move to another step. So we will start by making the pattern for our sweatshirt, and before we start I want to say that there are many different techniques how you can create the pattern. I will use this technique in particular because I find it very easy to make, and it's really logical steps and very understandable even for beginners. But just know that there are many different techniques out there how you can create the basic block for knit fabrics, and also you will be able to use this block later on for any kind of other project like a dress, a blouse, t-shirt or whatever. However, do keep in mind that this only works with knit fabrics that stretch pretty well because the pattern won't have any darts, so the requirement is stretch fabrics. So okay, let's start by doing the basic block and later we will do the sleeve. For the basic block you will need of course a long ruler, and now we will take the length of our sweater, which was from the highest point of the back up until where you want this sweater to end. In my case it was 58 centimeters, so I am here just making a line of 58 centimeters. Usually I do my patterns with a pencil, but it's basically invisible on the camera, so I am doing it with a Sharpie today. So now from the top of this point I want you to make a horizontal line which will be equal for half of your bust circumference plus some ease. So my bust circumference is 89 centimeters. I will add 5 centimeters for ease plus 5 centimeters plus ease, and now let's divide it by 2 and we have 47 centimeters. So now I will make sure that I have a 90-degree angle here and I will measure 47 centimeters. So I moved the camera so that you can see better. Here I marked from this point 47 centimeters, which is my bust circumference plus ease divided by half. And at the bottom I will do exactly the same. So I will take the ruler, make a beautiful 90-degree angle and mark 47 centimeters. Now somewhere in the middle, mark again 47 centimeters and connect these dots. Now that you have this ready, I want you to divide it into equal parts. To do that, we will divide 47 centimeters by 2 and we will get 23 centimeters and a half. So at the bottom, I will mark 23 centimeters and a half. I will make several marks here and here. And connect them with the line. So now, this will be the back of your sweatshirt and this piece will be the front. Now we will start working on our back piece. So on the back piece, I want you to measure from this point down the armhole depth. In my case, it was 22 centimeters. And when you were measuring, so from the highest point of the back to the armhole depth. Now from this point again, I will mark the length of my back to the waistline. So when you were measuring from the highest point to the waistline. In my case, it is 41 centimeters. So just again, 41 centimeters on every line here and connect it with the line and it will be our waistline. Okay, so now we will do the back neckline and the back neckline will go 2.5 centimeters below here and to the side 7 centimeters. If you have a very thick neck, it could be a little bit wider than 7 centimeters, but the standard 7 centimeters should be fine for most measures. And now we will do a curved line to connect it and create the neckline like this. So now from this point we will add our shoulder length. So when we were measuring the shoulder length, we measured from this point to this point and we will need a half of this measure. So in my case, the shoulder length was 39 centimeters divided by 2. It will be 19.5 and then we will take out 0.5 centimeters. So we will have 19 centimeters. And from this point, mark 19 centimeters. Like this. Now on your bust line, measure the same shoulder length, so 19 centimeters, and connect it with the line. So now we will measure from the waistline to the shoulders. When you were taking your measures, you were taking from the center of the waistline, measured to the shoulder. So in my case, this number was 42 centimeters. And from the center of the waistline, I will mark 49 centimeters. And I will make sure that the end of my ruler goes on this shoulder line, so like this. Now this point will be the end point of your shoulders, so we will connect the top of the neckline with the shoulder point. And now we have our back shoulder. So don't worry if your angle looks different. It highly depends on your figure. It can be, sharper angle. It can be a little bit dull angle. So it really depends on your figure. And for each and every one, this will look a little bit different. To form the armhole, from this point, you need to measure 3 centimeters up. And from this point, 7 centimeters up. So at this point where we marked 7 centimeters, I want you to put half of your back width. So when we were measuring the back width, we measured from this point to this point, and of course we will divide it by 2. So for me it was 36 centimeters divided by 2, it will be 18 centimeters. So I just going to mark 7 centimeters here, and from this point I will measure 18 centimeters. Now we will going to form our armhole. So our armhole will go from this point to this point, then through these 3 centimeters mark, and then it will go to this point. You can use your French ruler if you have, so we can do it like this. Now from this point to the 3 centimeter line, and then at the bottom like this. And now our back armhole is formed. So at the waistline we will measure our waist circumference divided by 4. But before you do that, I want you to add a little bit of ease to your waist circumference. So for me it's 70 centimeters, but I will add 10 centimeters for the ease. I like when my sweatshirts are not very tight fitting, but I do like when they're just slightly fitting. So my waist circumference is 70 centimeters. I will add 10 centimeters for the ease. I have 80 centimeters and I will divide it by 4, and now we have 20 centimeters. So from this point I will measure 20 centimeters like this. And now it's time to measure our sweater bottom. For me it is 91 centimeters. I will add a little bit of ease, so 91 centimeters plus 3 centimeters for the ease, and then divide it by 4. And now we have 23.5 centimeters, which will be exactly this point. Now for everybody, this measure will be completely different, so don't worry if your pattern in this spot looks different, because we all have different waistlines, we all have different hip circumferences, and we all like different ease, so no worries if it looks different. So now we will connect these dots from the bottom of the armhole to the waistline to the end of our sweater. So in my case, this corner is very sharp and looks a little bit unnatural, because natural figures do not have that kind of sharp edge. So I will take my ruler and I will just soften this line so that I have a clean line. So okay, the back part is finished, and now we can move to the front line, which will be a little bit easier because we already know what to do here. We will start from measuring our waistline, which was 20 centimeters. You have to measure your sweater bottom measure here. For me, it's exactly the same point. And now I will again connect all these points. And of course, I will just soften this corner right here. So now we will move upwards and we will start forming our neckline at the top. So here we added from this point 7 centimeters, so we will do exactly the same at the front part. From this point, add 7 centimeters like this. And now for the neckline depth, the standard is 8 centimeters, so I will add that right now. Of course, you can add a little bit different measure if you want to, but I like to do my basic drawing based on the standard measures, and then I will adjust the neckline based on the project that I'm doing. Now that we have our neckline measures, we will create a beautiful round neckline. So now at this point we will measure the shoulder length, which in our case was 19 centimeters from this point. So also from this point we will measure 19 centimeters, and on the bust circumference line we will measure 19 centimeters as well, and we will connect it with the line. Measure the distance from this line to the end of your shoulder. In my case, it's 3.5 centimeters. And now from this point, we will mark 3.5 centimeters plus 1 centimeter. So in total, I will mark 4.5 centimeters, because in the front, the shoulders are usually just a little bit sharper. I will connect this mark point with the top of my neckline. Now you can measure if your shoulders are both the same length. So this one is 12.5 centimeters. So this one turned out a little bit longer. I will just adjust at the neckline to create it at the same length. So now from this point I want you to measure 1.5 centimeters, and from this point I want you to mark 7 centimeters. So at the 7 centimeter mark we will measure half of our front width. So our front width, so we measured here. So in my case the front width is 34 centimeters. 34 divided by 2 and we will have 17 centimeters. So from this line we will mark 17 centimeters, and we have the dot here. So now, same as with the back, we will connect this point with this point through this point, and now here again our ruler comes really in handy. So that's it, our basic bodice is finished. I will still do a few adjustments for this particular design. So usually I like to make my sweatshirt necklines a little bit wider than the standard 7 centimeters. So I will just take and make it a little bit wider, so let's say by 2 centimeters. So at the shoulder line I am marking 2 centimeters and I am creating a new line, maybe a little bit more curvy. This is why I like to do my patterns with the pencil, because if you do something you can easily erase it and redraw it. Now we marked 2 centimeters and we have to do exactly the same here. So from this point I will mark 2 centimeters and I will just create a new neckline. Again, it's my own preference. I like it a little bit wider. It's up to you how you want to do it. At the neckline, we will add rib knitting. So we now have to mark where our rib knit will go. So I want my rib knit to be 3 centimeters wide. So all around the neckline, I will mark 3 centimeters. And connect it with a curved line. I will do exactly the same with the front piece, those same 3 centimeters, and draw a curved line. So at the bottom I will be also adding rib knit, and I want my rib knit to be 7 centimeter height. However, I also want that the main fabric of the sweatshirt slightly falls over the rib knit, so I will only reduce it by 5 centimeters here and maybe even by 4 centimeters. It's really up to you how you want to do it, so I will just mark it here. Our pattern basic block is really finished. We will be moving to the sleeve very soon. I just want to explain a little bit how you have to cut out your pattern. So you have to cut out the pattern like this. For the main fabric, you will cut it here without ribbing a line. Here, and again until the rib line, and you don't cut the rib line, you cut it here and here. Also cut out the rib line and set it aside because we will need it. We will not do a pattern according, but we will measure the top, so keep that piece. And in the front also the same. From the main fabric you will be cutting at this line, shoulders, armhole, then the side up until the rib, and then here. And also, same as in the back, cut out the rib piece and set it aside because we will need it. So now the pattern basic block is finished, and let's start doing our sleeve pattern. So for the sleeve, I want you to make the line at the top. From somewhere in the middle of this line, we will mark down our sleeve length. In my case, it is 56 centimeters. So I will mark 56 centimeters. First, we will need the armhole depth from our basic block. So my armhole depth was 22 centimeters. We will divide it by 2 at 11 centimeters, plus we will add 2 centimeters, and in total we will have 13 centimeters. So from this line we will mark 13 centimeters down, and from this point we will draw a line here. But to do that we need to have our arm circumference. So in my situation it will be 30 centimeters. Of course for you it can be different. So we will take the 30 centimeters and we will divide it by 2. We get 15 centimeters. So 15 centimeters from this side and 15 centimeters from this side. So now we will have to divide this distance in 2 equal parts. You can do it visually. It's not really requiring that much accuracy. It will be our help line. On this line we will measure this line, so 15 centimeters we will divide by 2, and then we will add plus 1 centimeter, and now we have in total 8.5 centimeters. So from here to here I will measure 8.5 centimeters, and the same from this point to here. So now I will connect these 2 dots with a new line, and it will look like this, and the same with another. So now we have 4 different lines, and I want you to divide each of the lines in equal parts. Again, you don't have to do it very accurately, you can do it visually, it's just fine. So from this point we will go 0.6 centimeters. From this point we will go up 1 centimeter. Now from this point here we will go 1.5 centimeters. And from this point here we will go 0.8 centimeters. So now we will connect all the lines like this. Starting from the line here, we will go up until this point, then we will go to the middle here, then we will go to this point, and then we will connect it here. So the beautiful curve. So this will be the front of your sleeve, this will be the back of the sleeve, so you will attach this to the front and this piece to the back. Now, final step, what we have to do is we have to measure the wrist circumference that we had measured, including the ease. So for me it's 20 centimeters, so I will mark 10 centimeters from the bottom of the sleeve here to this side and 10 centimeters to this side, so I have whole 20 centimeters, and I will just add this point to the bottom of the armhole and exactly the same at another side. So that's it. This is the basic block for the sleeve from knit stretch fabrics. The only adjustment I will do now is I will add ribbing. So my ribbing will be 6 centimeters, but I like to have that a little bit fall over. I will in total mark 3 centimeters here. Again, it's up to you how wide your rib you want to be. Maybe you don't want to add it at all. For me, I will just remove these 3 centimeters. And when you will be cutting your pattern out from the main fabric, so you will cut here, you will cut all these curves out, this land like this. So this next step is optional, but if you want to add embroidery to your sweatshirt, now is the best time to do it, just before you cut out the pattern from the fabric. So here is what you want to do. First, you have to decide where you want your embroidery to go. So for me, I will be adding embroidery to the front of my bodice, somewhere here on the left side. And I also will be adding it on my sleeve, somewhere here. So first, I have to cut these pieces out. So my fabric is folded here, and on the fold I am placing my pattern piece, and I will just simply cut out this fabric so that I have a little bit more space to do my embroidery. And now I will open this piece of fabric. Here we can see where the fold line is, so we're just going to mark it, right? Something like this. And now I will place my pattern piece here on the fold line. And remember, I want to do my embroidery on the left side of the sweatshirt. So I will trace on the right side of the fabric these lines of the left side of the bodice. And what this step will give us? First of all, this step will give us a little bit more fabric to do our embroidery on. And second of all, tracing this on this pattern piece on the right side of the fabric will allow us to place our embroidery more accurately. So somewhere like this, and now we can see the shape of the left side of the bodice, and you can decide where you want your embroidery to go. So I might want to do it somewhere here, somewhere here. This is where my embroidery will go. Now there is no need to cut out the pattern yet. We will go to the embroidery machine with this piece of fabric. We will do our embroidery and only later we will be cutting our pattern out. And remember, I also want to do embroidery on my sleeve, so I will just set this piece aside for a little while. I will take again my fabric, sliding off today. So I will place my sleeve here. Don't be afraid to give it a little bit of that extra fabric, because we will later trim it down, so no worries, but it will help you just do your embroidery better. And again, same as we did with the front side piece, we will trace around this pattern piece, so this gives us a little bit better navigation where we want our embroidery to go. So I'm not going to draw all around the sleeve because I only want embroidery on this part. So I traced here, and I also will mark the middle. And now I can think that I want my embroidery to go somewhere here. And now I can start to put these pieces to the embroidery hoop and do my embroidering. So my embroidery machine is set up for the work, and for today's embroidery I will be using Mettler's polysheen thread. As you know, embroidery threads are very different from sewing threads because they have that extra shine, and here you can see how gorgeous this thread is looking and how beautifully it reflects the light. Now, what is so special about Mettler's polysheen thread is that they have trilobal filament cross section, so they have a much larger surface and they can reflect light much better. Also, this thread is very resistible, so you can use it on sportswear, loungewear, and it will really perform very well. It's also very durable, so when you will be doing your embroidery, it will not break, and also it is very resistible for wear, wash, and even bleaching. One more great thing about this thread, that once you finish doing your embroidery, you can take the loose end of the thread and just simply wrap it here at the top, and then the thread will not fall out and will stay in place neatly and beautifully. So Mettler's polysheen comes in over 400 different colors and shades, so I am sure that you will find the right match for your project. And for today I have this set of embroidery threads, polysheen set of 28 colors, and it's a really gorgeous set, and you have it at home, and whenever you have a project idea, I am sure you will find the right color in this set. So for today I will be using this light brown color and also this slightly beige, slightly ivory color. So now let's move to the embroidery machine and do our embroidering. So the hoop is attached to the machine. I am using water-soluble interfacing to ensure stability while doing embroidery. The embroidery design is loaded, 9 minutes of embroidering, and we will just push start button and start our embroidering. So here is the progress so far. The design really looks beautiful, and just a few more minutes left with the embroidery. Once this is finished, I will continue to do the same embroidery on my sleeve part. Then I will go wash this whole thing to dissolve the interfacing, and then I will show you the final result. So here is how the finished embroidery looks like, and here how it looks like on the sleeve. Still a little bit of residues from the water-soluble interfacing left. I will clear it out later on, but now let's move on to the cutting. So now we'll start cutting our pattern out of fabric, and this step will highly depend if you did embroidering or not. So I did embroidering, so for me it's very important that this part where embroidery is exactly on the spot I want it to be. So I will fold my fabric in half and make sure that the wrong sides of the fabric are matched nicely. Now if you haven't done the embroidery, you can fold right sides together and it will be easier because you will not have to draw on the right side. But now, as we are very particular about how our embroidery will look like, we will be drawing on the right side of the fabric. No worries, it's just chalk, so we will later just remove it. The fabric is folded. I am taking my pattern piece and I will be placing it here. So I want this part to be somewhere here. So I will just navigate it and I will start drawing around. If you have pattern weights, this is a good time to use them. So yes, the embroidery is exactly where I want it to be. I can start cutting out this pattern piece. Our pattern did not have seam allowance, so we will have to add the seam allowance now while we will be cutting. For stretch fabrics, where I will be using overlock, I like to do seam allowance same as the width of my overlock seam, which is 0.7 centimeters or 7 millimeters, plus I add a few more millimeters, but because I really like when the overlock cuts the edge and leaves a very neat, clean edge. Basically, for me, the seam allowance will be 1 centimeter. So what you can do, you can go around your entire pattern and just like add 1 centimeter with the measuring tape, or I just simply start cutting out and the approximate 1 centimeter is fine. When you're cutting the fabric, make sure you're putting your hand like this so that you ensure that the fabric does not move around. And now I want you to mark the middle here from the right side and also from the wrong side, because it will help us easier place the neckband. So now you can cut out the back piece exactly the same. You can fold right sides together and cut it like that. And in the meantime, I will take my sleeve and I will cut it out. So for the sleeve, you can cut both sleeves at the same time. Just be careful about the fabric placement. So again, as with the front part, because I have embroidery here, it's very important for me to position it right. So this is why my fabric is facing upwards. And now at the bottom, I added another fabric for another sleeve. And now you can see that the wrong sides of the fabric are touching. And now I will just take my pattern. Be careful on which sleeve you want your embroidery to be. I want it to be on my right side. So I will place my sleeve pattern like this, so that the right side here, meaning this is the right sleeve here on top. And I want to really be careful that my embroidery is in the middle and slightly at the bottom, somewhere like this. Don't have a lot of space here, but it's okay, we don't have a huge seam allowance. So now I will just draw around. Now at the top, I want you to mark the middle part. Here it is. The embroidery is exactly where I want it to be. Now I will start cutting around. Again, don't forget to add 1 centimeter for the seam allowance. And once this is cut out, I want you to take the rib fabric and we will start to cut the rib parts. Here I have my rib knit ready, and I will start with the bottom ribbing because it's the largest piece, so we need to place it accordingly. So my bottom of my sweatshirt was 92 centimeters, but I really like when my rib knit is tight around the hips. I will use a little bit less rib knit so that I really get that tightness. Instead of 92 centimeters, I will reduce it by 10%. So 83 approximately centimeters. Now let's just divide it by 2 because we will be folding on half. 41.5 centimeters, and this is how much I will be marking on the fold. 41.5 centimeters on the fold plus 1 centimeter for the side seams. So in total, I will be marking 42.5. Okay, so exactly how much I folded. So it will be the side. And now I want my rib knit to be at the bottom. It will be 7 centimeters when folded, which means times 2 because we will be doing the fold. So 14 centimeters plus we will be adding plus 1 centimeter from each side for the seam allowance. So plus 2 centimeters. So in total, the height of the rib I need to cut out now is 16 centimeters. And here I will just mark 16 centimeters. Connect them with the line. And now you can cut out this piece. Remember, we already added our seam allowance, so no need to add it again. Just simply cut where you drew. And you can set this piece aside for a while. Now we will be moving on to the cuffs. So for the cuffs, I really like when they are fitting very closely to my arm. So I will measure the wrist measure. For me, it's 16 centimeters. So I will have to mark 16 centimeters. I will fold my fabric because I will be cutting both cuffs at the same time. Here is slightly more than 16 centimeters, but we will be adding for 1 centimeter from each side for the seam allowance, so cut out total 18 centimeters. And this is where I will mark it. So I want my cuff to be 5 centimeters in the total view. No, maybe I will be doing 6 centimeters in the final view, which means 12 centimeters because we will be folding, plus 2 centimeters because we will be adding 1 centimeter for seam allowance from both sides, which means the height of my cuff total will be 14 centimeters. And I will just go around and mark it here. Now let's cut. Again, we added already our seam allowance, so no need to add it here. And because we are cutting 2 cuffs, so just here where the fold is, just let's cut through. Here, and you can set those cuffs aside, we will not need them for a while. And now the last and final piece is our collar. So for the collar, I want you to take these pattern pieces that we cut out in the beginning. You want to add them together, yeah, probably like this. You want to add them together. This actually doesn't matter. So this is how your collar looks like, half of the collar. So I want you to measure the top part. $21.5 for my side. Just to mention again what we measured the top of both of these parts, which is the half of your collar, 21.5, and this is how much we will mark on the fold. 21.5 at 1 centimeter for seam allowance, so in total 22.5 centimeters. When we were doing our collar, we said that it will be 3 centimeters width in the final view, which means that we will be cutting it on fold, so 6 centimeters total, plus 2 centimeters for seam allowance, 1 centimeter from each side, so in total I have to mark 8 centimeters. And that's it, we can cut it out. So now that all of your pattern pieces are ready, I want you to go to your sewing machine and we will be starting the fun part, the assembly of the sweatshirt. So for the assembly of the sweatshirt, you will need a 4-thread overlock as well as a straight stitch machine. I will show you a little bit later. So just keep them both threaded and ready because we will be switching between them a lot. For this project, I will be using Mettler's Cerakote thread, which is the perfect overlock thread, no matter what kind of overlock you're using. It really gives a great glide and trouble-free sewing. It does not shrink, it does not wash out, so you will have a very durable seam. It comes in wide range of different colors, so I am sure you will be able to match the right for your project. So now all 4 threads already on my overlock and I can start assembling. So before starting sewing, I will just remove this free arm because I like sewing my sweatshirts without it, but it's up to you. You can leave it here if you want to. So I wanted to take you the bodice pieces at the shoulders and put right sides of both front and back pieces together. So here is our back piece, here is our front piece, and they are connected here at the shoulder line, right sides together. Make sure they are aligned well. You can start sewing. I know that some people like to pin their fabric when they're sewing, but really it's very short seam, so I will not be pinning, but again, up to you. And I will just start. Trim it at the end of the seam and at the beginning of the seam, and here how it looks like. Now repeat with another shoulder and then we will move to another machine. So I switched to the straight stitch machine and we will be start straight stitching, but first we have to make sure we are using the right thread, and today we are using Mettler's Ceraflex thread, which is the new thread, and because of its innovative raw material PTT, it has the elongation of approximately 65%, so this gives really high elastic seams. I get a lot of questions on my Instagram how to sew with a standard stitch and a standard machine, so here is one way out using the extremely elastic thread. This thread can be used for active wear, for outwear, even swimsuits and underwear. Really great thread, but the only thing you have to note that because of its elasticity, you have to reduce the tension of the sewing machine so it does not stretch out the thread unnecessarily. And other than that, this is a great thread for elastic seams, and this is exactly what we will be using today. So now we will be doing top stitching at the shoulder line. So I know that some people add silicone straps to their shoulders to prevent them from stretching out. I don't do that. I find that overlock and the top stitch is enough to keep it in place, but of course it's up to you. If you want to add this silicone strap, you can do that. And now I will do the top stitching. So the right side of the garment is here, and here is the back of the garment. So I will just take the seam allowance and I will fold it to the back part. I will put it under my sewing machine and I will stitch it about 1-2 millimeters from the side, making sure there is no overlapping like this. No, the seam is very clean and the seam allowance is pushed to the back side. So at the beginning, securing stitches, and then so here is how the top stitched part looks like. It can be a little bit wavy, just like you see here. No worries, we will soon press it and make it flat and beautiful. And in the meantime, I want you to do the same on the other shoulder. Before you move to the ironing board and iron those shoulder lines flat, I want you to do your collar and sew it together here at the end. So we left for the sides 1 centimeter seam allowance. So here is approximately 1 centimeter, and using the same straight stitch, securing at the beginning and we'll secure at the back, and I will just simply sew it together. So when you will go to your ironing board, now I want you to also open this seam flat and iron it so it's beautifully open, and then I will meet you again at our overlock. So actually, before moving to the overlock, once you've done ironing this seam flat and shoulders as well, like this, see how beautiful the shoulders are looking right now. I want you to do one more thing with your straight stitch, is to secure the ending of the rib at the end of the back, because I know that a lot of domestic overlocks do not handle the thick materials pretty well, mine included, so it does push it a little bit when it starts sewing, and I want really this seam to be in the middle of the back, otherwise it does not look as neat. So I will a few stitches with a straight stitch to secure it in place, and later I will do the overlock. So to really put it in place, I will just take one pin. My collar is folded so that the wrong side is inside and the wrong side is inside, and here is the middle of my back. I will pin it like here. This is the right side of the fabric. I will put it in the middle. I will push this pin here so it really stays put together, and just a few stitches here to secure the collar seam in place. Remove the pin, and yes, your seam is now in place, and now we can move on to the overlock. So we are back to our overlock, and now I want you to take the front of the sweater here where we mark the middle. Now I want you to take the rib collar, which is already secured here at the end, and I want you to fold this collar in two and just find the center middle here. These edges must be together. And now just take the front of the shirt and pin the middle of this collar so that it's neatly in place. Now it's up to you whether you want to pin the rest of the collar or not, but basically what we will be doing while overlocking, we will be folding our collar neatly in the middle so that all edges align, and then we will be stretching it out slightly so that it fits into our collar like this. I know it can be a little bit frightening at the beginning, but trust me, it's not that hard. The rib knit is very flexible fabric, so it gives you a lot of freedom. It's just very simple to sew. We will start at the end. I cannot go with my overlocker for this part yet, but I will start slightly away from the middle. So all the edges are aligning. My collar is folded in half and the sides are aligned, and I am placing it on the edge of my neckline while sewing, and just simply start sewing. And then we will find the middle again and simply stretch the rib knit so that it fits into your neckline, and just grab it in places, stretched out, and just simply sew it. Don't be surprised that you will need to stretch out more in the front part, because this is where the rib knit really has to do a big curve. So this is why we are stretching that much in the front versus in the back. Remove the pin, because you never want to sew with overlocker through pin. It's a huge no-no. You can damage everything around it. So again, we will be moving from the front center to the back, and again, just stretch everything out and see how it fits. Basically, the idea is the wider the rib collar, the more stretching you will have to do. And if the rib collar is very narrow, so you will not need to do that much stretch. So once this part is finished, our collar is really getting in shape. It's really starting to look beautiful. Just one more step left to go. Actually, this step is optional, but I do like to do it. So here you see how this seam is not really beautiful. I don't really like how it looks like, so I like to add a narrow strap here and to beautifully cover it. But it's okay to leave it like this, just simply iron it to avoid any wrinklage. But I really recommend you to try out adding the strap, and this is what we will do now. For this next step, we will be adding a strap here to neatly cover this overlocked seam. This will also help reinforce the back seam, so this will increase the wearability and longevity of the sweatshirt, and also it will just look so pretty. So before this step, I went ahead and ironed the collar. Sorry for the water stains, my steam iron is misbehaving today a little bit, but it will quickly dry out. And now I want you to take the back of your sweatshirt and I want you to measure this seam somewhere from 1 centimeter below the shoulder line. So you will measure it like this. Yeah, something like this. So in my case, it's about 24 centimeters. I will go ahead and cut out a strap from the same fabric. It is cut horizontally, so it has really good stretch. So it is 3 centimeters in wide, and then the length is the measure that you measured plus ½ centimeter from each side for seam allowance. So I now want you to fold these sides about ½ centimeter, just as our seam allowance, and make a very short seam, just so that those edges are kept in place and that they don't bother us. So now take the back of your sweatshirt like this, fold this overlocked seam about 1 centimeter from the shoulder line, place your strap and just sew across this overlocked seam, trying to sew as close to this edge as possible. And while sewing, make sure that your strap aligns with the edge of the overlock. Once this is done, I want you to go to the ironing board and then iron this piece down. So now that this strap is neatly ironed, now we can do top stitching, and we will start doing our top stitching from the edge here, and we will do top stitching all around our neckline so that we secure this overlocked seam so that it does not roll over, and it will be more comfortable for you to wear it when it's locked down in a position. Plus it will have a better wearability. And don't worry about the stretch, because we are using elastic thread, meaning it will give us maximum elasticity to the seam, and you will not have to sacrifice the comfort for beauty. So for the top stitching, sew about 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters from this side, and sew all around the neckline. So once you went around the neckline, it looks like this. See how beautiful, gorgeous it's look already. Don't worry about these wrinkles. We will iron it out with a little bit of steam and it will be gone. So now the last step is to finish up with our strap. And to do so, you will have to sew and fold it to place. Just make sure that it's very equal on all sides. So I see that it's a little bit longer on these edges, so I will take a moment and just trim it down. When we will be sewing and attaching this part to the back of our sweatshirt, just take this strap and fold it and sew on this edge. Make sure that you're sewing exactly the same measure from this seam all around it. Let's start doing it. So sorry, I am not showing this step while I'm sewing because this really requires a lot of precision and I have to really be up close to see if this seam is at the same width as this one. The general idea, while you're sewing, you're folding so that this strap becomes the same width. New seam that you're making is at the same measure from the seam at every point of the neckline. So once you finished attaching the strap to the bodice, from the inside it will look like this. From the outside it will look like this. So now I want you to go ahead again to your ironing board and iron this new seam flat, and then I will meet you at the overlock with your sleeves. So we now move to our overlock and we will start adding the sleeves in. So there are many different ways how you can add the sleeves to your sweatshirt. The one that we will be doing today is adding sleeves in the open sweatshirt, in the opened armhole. So maybe not something that you're used to, but let's try this out. So we will take the sleeve. I will start from the left side, so take left sleeve. Here we marked the top middle of the sleeve, so I will just put it here at the shoulder line and I will just pin it in place. Get ready, we will do a lot of pinning in this step. Now I will pin here so that the edges match and pin again, and here exactly the same so that both edges match. Now, if you've done everything correctly, it will not be difficult to insert your sleeve. So from the sleeve side, just continue to pin like this. Here where you see there is quite a lot of sleeve cap, just don't get discouraged, don't be afraid. You will be able to push it nicely without any wrinkles, without any gathers. I use quite a lot of pins for this step because I really like when my sleeve is set in place. So here it is, our sleeve is pinned. As you can see, there are no gathers, nothing from any side. And now we will start sewing. Of course, remember to move your pin before the overlock reaches it, because you really do not want to sew through pin. That's a disaster. While you're sewing, just make sure by feeling, by the touch of the hand, just make sure that there is no bulk, that no gathers are being created, and everything just is smooth and beautiful. The sweatshirt is going to be gorgeous. I already feel it. Our sleeve is almost inserted. We will have one more step in this, but first I want you to do exactly the same with another sleeve, and then let's switch to the straight stitch machine. So now that you have overlocked your sleeves, we will do top stitching, and we will simply push the overlocked seam towards the body, not the sleeve, and then we will do 1-2 millimeter stitch away from the seam line and secure the overlocked side on the body of the sweatshirt. Now what this will give, again, this will give durability because the overlocked seam will not roll like this all the time, and it will really just look more neat. So the top stitch will look something like this. It is of course very wrinkled. Repeat the same step with another sleeve and just iron this sleeve part to really make it smooth and beautiful. So now our sleeve set in and beautifully ironed, so the seam looks very, very smooth and beautiful. And now we will join the arm seams and the side seams, and we will do so of course on the overlock, but before that I just want to match these two seams beautifully, and to do so I will do a little straight stitch again, exactly the same as we did when we were adding the rib collar. So match these seams together, take one pin and pin exactly where those seams match, and then just simply do a little seam here. This seam is simply so that our seams match, because as I mentioned, my overlock does not handle thick fabrics very well and it tends to push it, so it's impossible to match it perfectly. But with this step we can really match those seams neatly, and do exactly the same with another armpit. And then let's move to our overlock. At our overlock we will sew from the bottom of the sleeve all around here to the bottom of the sweater. Now it's up to you if you want to pin it or not. I tend to not pin it, I just simply make sure everything aligns beautifully and then just sew, but it is up to you. You can just pin all along. I tend not to do this. Let's start. When you're sewing with overlock, just try not to overstretch this part, because it is easy to overstretch, so just try not to do it. Let the fabric flow by itself. Don't get scared when you come across the armpit. We have secured it here with a stitch so the seams match, and then just sew through it. So here it is, all overlocked, all beautiful. Now I will do exactly the same with another side, and then we will move again to the straight stitch machine. So we are at the final finish line, and the only thing left for us to do is to add the bottom rib and the cuff rib. Then to do that, well, you need to first do a straight seam connecting the edge of the bottom of the rib. Remember, we left 1 centimeter seam allowance here, so just sew 1 centimeter. Like this. And then for the cuffs, exactly the same. Fold and sew 1 centimeter from the side. Now I want you to go to your ironing board and open and iron these all seams open, and then let's meet here at the straight stitch machine again. So now that you have ironed your seam open, I want you to take your cuff, fold it neatly in half like this. I want you to match this seam with the seam on the sleeve bottom. We will of course attach the cuff itself with the overlock, but then again we want these seams to really match beautifully, and using a straight stitch it's a way easier to do, and just a few stitches to secure this seam in place. And do the same with another cuff. Now for the bottom rib, you want to do exactly the same, just fold it like this, and now it depends up to you where you want this connecting line to be. You can either do it in the back middle, or you can do it on the side. I decided to do it on the side. You will take it like this, just match it, pin it and do a few stitches to secure it in place so that it matches beautifully with the seam on the sweater. And now let's move to our overlock for the very last step. So for this very last step, I want you to take the cuff, fold it in half, and fold the sleeve in half as well. Just match those middles together and pin. And now we will slightly stretch our rib so that it's at the same width as our sleeve bottom, and then we will just sew it with overlock. Here is how your finished cuff looks like from the wrong side, and now do exactly the same with another cuff. So once the cuffs are attached, we will do our very final seam, which is to attach the rib bottom to the bottom of the sweatshirt. And to do so, just simply fold the rib like this, find the middle, and attach that middle to the side seam. And then again start sewing, making sure that the rib is folded in half, the sides match, and that it is beautifully aligned with the bottom of the sweatshirt. And because our rib is a little bit smaller than the bottom of the sweatshirt, don't forget to slightly pull the rib so that it fits into the bottom. So now that the ribs are attached, you are officially finished with your shirt. You can turn it right side out now and give it a final press, and that's it. You will be finished. Here it is, our finished sweatshirt. So this is it, and I hope you enjoyed this sewing class. If you have any kind of question, please write a message down in the comment section. I will make sure I will answer your questions. And if you create the sweatshirt based on this tutorial, I would love to see it. So please do not hesitate to send me a photo via Instagram messages. So thank you very much for watching today. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!